Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Film Focus, episode 198, the review for Jurassic World Rebirth. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen of the North, South, East and West, and welcome to another episode of Film Focus. I'm your host, the Hypersonic55, and I'm glad that you decided to join me once again for some film-related discussion. And here we are, it is July, and there are some pretty notable films coming out, not only next week, but towards the end of the month in the form of Superman and the Fantastic Four. But just prior to those films coming out, we have Jurassic World Rebirth, the newest entry in the Jurassic series, and this is the one that's hoping to try and revitalize the franchise after the last trilogy sort of tanked it into the depths of the ocean. Now, the Jurassic franchise is pretty much in the toilet thanks to the last trilogy descending into deeper levels of mediocrity. And before we get into the review for this new film, I just wanted to touch upon my experience with the series as a whole. Now, like a lot of kids that grew up in the 90s, I watched Jurassic Park and was completely enamored by it. It had the perfect mix of sci-fi, action, adventure, and a bit of horror, and with its themes that it explored along with its memorable cast, fantastic music, and incredible digital and practical effects that brought the dinosaurs to life, it was magical. And as an adult, I loved the film just as much and believe it is an incredible piece of work that none of the sequels can even remotely touch. Now, when it comes to The Lost World, I think it still has a good vibe. I like some of the stuff that they were trying to do with the story, certain themes it was trying to attempt to explore. I really enjoy some of the dinosaur action and set pieces, and I appreciate how it tried to continue what the original film did, but also pose new questions about how the dinosaurs should be treated and utilized. But the story and characters weren't as strong, and some of the scenarios and plot elements felt incomplete or just a little silly. And when you learn about the behind the scenes nature of how that film came together and what had to be cut or changed, it becomes apparent when you watch the film after learning about those background details. And then there's Jurassic Park 3, which felt like it abandoned logic and all of the thought-provoking elements that came with the previous films and just turned into a straight-up action film. And while there's definitely some fun to be had there with some of the action sequences, seeing the different types of dinosaurs, having certain characters, and the humor, which is both intentional and unintentional, at the same time, the film is just ridiculous to the point where it feels contradictory to what came before. And even though it tries to shake things up with the story and scenarios, it just doesn't quite work out. And again, this was another one of those films that changed a lot in the production process, whether it be the script stuff or how the film planned out. And being the shorter film of the series, of the original Jurassic Park series, it's just like, okay. But again, there is definitely value to be found in that film. And then there's the Jurassic World trilogy. Now, Jurassic World, when it came out in 2015, was a film I enjoyed enough at the time, but I was never fully in love with it. I feel like it did a lot of good things, a lot of interesting things, but as an overall piece, it just didn't come together. But as the years have gone by, I found myself disliking the film more and more. Now, that's not to say the film doesn't have any merits. I like the music from Michael Giacchino, I like the cast, I like some of the aspects of his meta-commentary and some of the action scenes and the ideas about the dinosaurs being created in modern times and what the applications could be for stuff outside of the park was, interesting. However, some of the ideas and themes weren't executed as well as they could have been. And this film embraced more of the roller coaster nature of the series by focusing on the dinosaurs and less on the introspective and thought-provoking elements that make the first film so good. So by the time it was over, I'm like, yeah, this is okay. This is a decent starting off point, but hopefully they're going to do something better with the sequel. Now, Fallen Kingdom to this day leaves a bad taste in my mouth as it has so much potential to be a great film, but it missed the mark by quite a distance. I was super excited by a lot of the stuff that was said prior to the film's release, with the introduction of J.A. Bayona as the director, how they said they were going to make the series a little bit more darker, a little bit more scary, and do some interesting things with the dinosaurs and the story. And like the previous film, there are definitely aspects of this film that you can appreciate. I like the attempt to make the film a little bit more darker, a little bit more scary, and having the original island get destroyed by a volcano and then taking a number of the dinosaurs away from the island and brought into the mainland to be sold on the black market. And the ideas were decent, but so much of the stuff that I like is undone by ridiculous scenarios, annoying characters. I see you, Justice Smith, and an odd retcon that slightly muddles the water when it comes to the reason why these dinosaurs exist. And towards the end of the film, there is a decision that is made to unleash the dinosaurs into civilization. And I don't hate the idea of man and dinosaurs trying to coexist in the modern age. It's more so how it happened. The decision was stupid and irresponsible, and I hate it to this day. There could have been a better way to do it, and no, I can't get on board with that. And then you have Dominion, the last film of the Jurassic World series at the time. And well, that film is just silly. While I like certain action scenes, the unintentional humor that came from Dodgson, and I got a kick out of seeing the original cast again from the first film, the story wasn't great and wasted the potential of the premise. And seeing the dinosaurs interacting with the humans was one of the key aspects that they advertised in this film, and you barely got to see any of it in the film. Instead, what we got was lackluster action, dinosaur hybrids that didn't leave an impression, and a poor use of the stellar cast they had assembled. And of course, we can't talk about this film without mentioning the giant flying locusts that were on fire. So after Dominion came out, I had pretty much just given up on the franchise and was ready to put it on ice. However, Universal in their infinite wisdom couldn't let the franchise chill. So when I heard we was going to jump back into the Jurassic World franchise again, I was just like, I don't know, man. I feel like we've gone as far as we can go and we need some time. We need to be separated from this franchise. But there was one glimmer of hope. There was the name David Keopp. Now, for those who don't know, he was the writer on the original Jurassic Park. So I was thinking, okay, if there is anything of value that this series could have, is bringing back the original writer. And then there was the choice to have Gareth Edwards join the project as well. And while I know he's not had the track record that brings everybody to the cinema, I still enjoy his filmography quite a bit. Monsters is a great film. Godzilla, despite its issues, is still a really good film for me. Rogue One is great, despite the fact that there's obviously contention about how much of that film is Gareth Edwards and how much of it is Tony Gilroy's. And the creator from 2023, I believe, that was one of my favorite films of that year. I enjoyed that story, the visuals, and Gareth Edwards has a very unique eye when it comes to creating his films, having them have a sense of scope and space, and he does well with action and mystery and build up towards things. So I was thinking, okay, this is cool. And prior to the film's release, he was saying so many right things to me. Him, the writer, and some of the producers surrounding the film, they were saying, we're going to bring it back to basics. We're going to bring back the fear. We're going to bring back the awe, the wonder, the magic of the original film. And the premise of this film sounded interesting. However, we saw the first trailer, and that's when the first signs of skepticism and fear started to settle in. That first trailer did not demonstrate the ideas and all the quotes that I'd been hearing about prior to that first trailer. It seemed a lot more light-hearted, filled with comedic elements, and seemed a little silly. And I was like, this isn't the film that I was hoping for. So then we fast forward to the second trailer. I'm like, okay, this is a little better. It's giving me a little bit more of the Jurassic Park vibe I'm looking for, but it still has a certain amount of humor that I'm not keen on, and I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy these characters as much as I wanted. But I kept holding out hope. And then I saw the film on opening night, and man, coming out of that film, if I were to describe it in one word, my experience was mixed. Very mixed. On the one hand, the film does a lot of really cool and decent things, and when it's locked in, it is a good time, and I was enjoying myself, and I was thinking, okay, this is the film that I was hoping for. But then you step away from that and then see all the other stuff that the film does, and you're just like, this series just can't seem to move on, or it can't seem to find its feet and want to try to create something that is substantial, that honors the legacy of what came before, but also feels like its own identifiable thing with logic and fun. It's just so bizarre. So yeah, this review is going to be a little messy because I have a lot to say, but at the same time I don't want to talk about spoilers, so I'll have to tiptoe around a few things here and there, but hang in there with me as we navigate our way through this. So as per usual with these reviews, I'll talk about the story, characters and presentation. So without further ado, let's jump in. Alright, so the story can be summed up as the following. Set 5 years after Jurassic World Dominion, we have an island that is one of those secret islands that wasn't known to us in the previous films. At a certain point in the past, there were experiments done to create these super dinosaurs that were so bad and dangerous that they couldn't be utilized on any of the attractions or, the islands that we'd seen before. Now, there was an incident there that required the facility to be shut down, and it's basically been labeled a no-go area. However, a new discovery is made via a paleontologist and a pharmaceutical representative that if they were to extract DNA from 3 of the prehistoric creatures, it could lead to a groundbreaking medical breakthrough. So there is an expedition that is formed to go to that island and then get the extracts from all 3 of those creatures. However, while going on that trip, as per usual with these kind of films, chaos ensues, and there also happens to be a random family that is in the area that gets caught up in the chaos. So now they are all stuck together trying to work their way through this whole thing together. And that's a way for me to summarize the film without going into the area of spoilers. Now, Rebirth had a decent idea on paper, but its execution is questionable. The film has moments of fun, tension, and all the good stuff that reminds you of why you like this franchise in general. However, at the same time, it feels like this series cannot evolve, and while it tries new ideas, it seems to continuously fall back on tropes and callbacks that remind audiences of what's come before, but in a less effective way. It feels like it's trying to run in 2 different directions, and at times is failing at both. The best way for me to describe this film is that what if you took the general gist of Jurassic Park 3, but then took a few callbacks to the previous other Jurassic Park films in terms of 1 and 2, primarily 1, had a little bit of Jaws thrown in there for good measure, and then tried a few new ideas, but by the time the film is over, you kind of question how much of it was worth it and how much of it did come into play in the grand scheme of things. I kept questioning several of the decisions that were made in this film, because if we just applied a little bit more logic to it, made things a little bit more tense and terrifying, then yeah, we could have been onto something. But as it stands, it's just like this film feels like a collection of moments that were really good, but interspersed within those, you just had a lot of random fluff-based material or stuff that was just like kind of frustrating, and I'm just like, what are we doing here? And as I said before, it feels like this film is the greatest hits of the original films, but remixed with some newer stuff. And the best example I have for that is Terminator Genisys in the first portion of that film, when they tried to remix elements of Terminator 1 and 2 along with the newer elements of that film. It's like, I don't want to be reminded of Terminator Genisys. That film was ghastly. But on top of that, there are moments that are quieter, a little bit more introspective, and they are trying to get some development or emotional parts. However, they don't feel earned. The problem with this film is that it focuses too much on the spectacle, but then when it's not focusing on the spectacle, it has all these other things that it's trying to make you care about, but because there's not enough time to be fully invested in it, and plus because it's written so badly, you don't care. So when you're trying to have these more emotional or interesting or dramatic stuff, or certain reveals that's supposed to happen in the film that's supposed to elicit an emotion, you don't get it. You don't feel. You do not respond in the way that you want to, or how the film wants you to, because they haven't earned it. They haven't put in the time. And while there has been complaints and questions brought up about like the quality of the characters in the original film, what that film has over this is people who feel distinctive. You understand who they are and what they can do in a very short space of time. They are charming, they leave an impression, and they are all utilized in a way that feels like it furthers the plot. And when they are either interspersing in different groups, or they're on their own, or coming together, everything clicks. With this film, it feels like they tried sometimes or didn't try enough at certain other times, and it's very frustrating because, as I said before, when it clicks, I was having fun, and there were certain aspects of this film that I feel like it did better than the previous two. However, there are certain times where I felt like even Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, for all the faults and frustrations that film gave me, I feel like that film had its head on its shoulders just a little bit more, and it was executing things possibly even better than this one. Whereas this film, the good times are sporadically placed amongst the not so good stuff, and it's just like, God, man, just trying to think about it is just causing me, like, pain. So let's move on to the characters. And the cast did what they could with the material that they're given. However, I think I'd like them a lot less if they weren't being played by actors that I liked. Most of the characters were either unlikable or just there. They just don't have the charisma, charm, or distinctive features that made the characters in the previous films memorable. And really and truly, if you're thinking about the cast as a whole, the only people you'll really be remembering, or the ones that actually have any value in the movie, is Scarlett Johansson as Zora, Mahershala Ali as Duncan, and Jonathan Bailey as Dr. Henry Loomis. To a lesser degree, you have Rupert Friend as Martin, and then you have Manuel Garcia Rolfo as Ruben. They are all the characters who have value in this film. Everybody else was either okay to nothing, or at worst frustrating and they should have got eaten. Anyway, you have Scarlett Johansson, who I know some people were questioning why she was in this film, just because she didn't seem to come across as the mercenary type. Now, Johansson, I like her as an actress. I have seen her in a number of projects and I quite enjoy her. And in the trailer, she was giving me a little bit of that Black Widow vibe, but just a little bit more comedic than she was before. But unfortunately, in the film, she seems to just be, I wouldn't say snarky, but she's very, jokey, and doesn't seem to take things very seriously. And while she does seem at least somewhat capable of doing her job, there is something about the performance that just doesn't make you buy her being like a tough mercenary character. But also beyond that, everything about her just feels so surface level. There doesn't seem to be anything that has any depth. And while there are a couple of moments here and there where she speaks to a couple of the characters about certain events that happened in her past, and it's supposed to make her feel like she has at least a little bit more layers, unfortunately it just didn't work. And then when you have Mahershala Ali, who I love in so many projects, he was possibly my favorite character in the movie. He had a little bit more charm, a little more charisma. He had a certain energy to him that was fun. But again, he was only slightly better than Johansson just because he had a little bit more to do, and his character's history gave just a little bit more layers to him. But as an overall character, he could have been so much more, and I feel like the material he was given was, failed him. And Jonathan Bailey as Henry Loomis, I thought he was all right, but again, he seemed like such a comedic, silly character, and the lack of seriousness that came with him, especially with someone of his position being a paleontologist. But yeah, Rupert Friend, if you know, you know. If you're paying attention, you know. He did what he could with the material he was given, but it was okay. And Manuel Garcia Ruffalo as Ralpho as Ruben, he was cool. I liked him. I liked his performance. I liked that he was just there trying to take care of his family. Of the family, he was my favorite character. The daughter who played Isabella, she was nice. She had some decent moments of humor. But the other daughter, Teresa, played by Luna Blase. I'm sorry, I'm not great with surnames, but Teresa, didn't like her very much. And then the actor who played Xavier, I didn't like him. Didn't like him at all. he was horrible. End of story. And then you have the other members of Zora's team who barely have enough time to be of value. And I wish they had given these characters way more screen time for them to feel like notable people. So when certain events happened in the movie later on, it felt like, okay, we cared about everybody and not just the key people that were shown in the trailer. And now we move on to the presentation, which was good for the most part. Visually, I think the film has some nice cinematography, especially when it came to certain specific shots where you saw the franchise from different perspectives when it came to certain establishing shots or how certain action scenes were done. While this film didn't have nearly as much of the distinctive elements that I like from Gareth Edwards' work when it comes to how he makes the environments feel big and vast. You see things from lower angles and everything does have that sense of scale where you're just like, wherever I am, I feel like I'm an ant in this space or a very small person in this space. You feel the vastness of everything, especially when it comes to stuff like Godzilla or Rogue One or The Creator. I feel like there are tiny moments where you get to have these nice establishing shots or quiet moments where you're just like, okay, this is feeling a little bit more like a Gareth Edwards project to me. But whoever was working on the cinematography, they did an okay job, but the decent moments of visual material was few and far between. And when it came to the CGI that was used, it was pretty good, especially on certain dinosaurs. But other times it didn't look as clean, and there didn't seem to be as much in the way of practical effects. Now, I know that this is something that I guess maybe later fans of the franchise probably don't care about, but for those of us who grew up in the era when Jurassic Park was finding its feet and evolving, the balance between having practical dinosaurs on set as well as the 3D digital enhanced editions that really enhanced the way that we used visual effects in movies. There was that perfect balance, and the directors that worked beforehand knew how to utilize them. Jurassic World attempted to try and have those balances, but I don't feel like they were as effectively done. This film, I didn't see barely any practical effects, and if they were there, they were either very well hidden or maybe digitally touched up to the point where it didn't feel like there was anything on screen. But again, there were some decent action scenes in here where I'm just like, yo, okay, we're cooking with a little bit of heat. There's some mystery going on here. There's a little bit of ambience and a little bit of build up to certain things. But other times I'm just like, we could have made this a little longer. Or certain action scenes here and there were just like, they're alright, but doesn't really compare to what we've seen in the franchise before. I was expecting a little bit more. And then when it comes to the music, this was a disappointment, and it hurts because it's Alexandre Desplat. He is a really great film composer, and I've liked a number of the projects he's worked on, especially with his work with Gareth Edwards before on Godzilla. And he's done some good stuff with working with Wes Anderson and his contributions to Harry Potter as well. But with this film, I felt like the music was just lacking that oomph. It felt like several times it was trying to do something, but it just didn't quite hit. I don't know if Desplat was possibly the wrong choice for it, but when he tried to emulate the sort of magic and awe and joy and discovery based vibe that John Williams created with his earlier entries, it feels like it's trying, but it's nowhere near there. And then there's the fact that this film utilizes the themes from the original Jurassic Park. However, the way it's utilized in the film feels very odd. At times, it's used in places where it feels wrong and feels tonally inconsistent with what's happening on screen, or it's in moments that are supposed to try and elicit the same kind of emotional response that you got from the original Jurassic Park, but what's happening on screen isn't nearly as awe-inspiring, scary, or interesting, so it just feels like, oh yeah, I see what you're trying to do, but it ain't working, baby. No, no, no. Me and my sister at several times while watching the film were just like, yo, we see what you're trying to do, but it doesn't feel earned. Stop it. So yeah, in conclusion, Jurassic World Rebirth, it wasn't a complete waste of time, and there's definitely value in certain aspects of the film. However, it wasn't the return to form that I'd hoped it would be. And to be fair, this is on me. I shouldn't have, thought that this film was going to do a complete 180 for the franchise and bring us back from the brink of filth. A lot of people said that this film was going to fail beforehand, and I am a fairly pessimistic and cynical person about a number of things in life. But when it comes to my entertainment, whether it be films, TV shows, or video games or anime, I like to err on the side of cautiousness, but also optimism as well. I like to be cautiously optimistic about a number of things that I'm unsure about, because I like to be surprised. I like to enjoy things. And even if there are signs of danger, I want to hope that we're going to get a good product at the end of the day. And with Gareth Edwards and with David Keopp being at the helm, all of the stuff that they said prior to this film, it gave me the illusion of hope. I really wanted to believe that this was going to be some good stuff. But as it stands, it's literally just on the bottom end of the barrel. If I was to say how this film compares to the other films in the series, I would probably say it's somewhere between Fallen Kingdom and Dominion, sort of around that bottom end of the set. And the thing is, like, I could probably rate this film a lot lower, especially if you saw my score on Letterboxd. If you aren't following me on there, I'm Hypersonic55, just look me up. But yeah, unless the film offends me to the point where I'm just angry or just, blown away by how bad it is, I'll normally try to, be at least a little bit fairer. Because again, unless you're hurting me physically or mentally, I will never rate anything like, is it crazy badly? But I can understand why people would rate this film like, is it pretty badly? Because it doesn't do much new, and what it does do new is okay, but it's not that much dramatically different from what came before. And the stuff that it's trying to emulate in terms of giving you that feeling of being back with the original Jurassic Park, it just doesn't quite get there. And while I know that there are a number of people that love this franchise that will probably still be able to help it make bank to possibly allow for a sequel, if we were to get another entry in this series, there is going to have to be some significant changes when it comes to the writing, when it comes to the direction, when it comes to how we are choosing to honor this franchise, but also let it stretch beyond the limitations of what we've had before. We can't keep spinning our wheels like this. This series, much like Star Wars, has the potential to do so much with it, but we seem to be messing around in the same damn playground and not allowing ourselves to get beyond what is established before. There are capable writers out there, there are capable directors out there, there are capable idea makers. Just make it happen. I know making films is difficult and it takes a lot of work to try and make this stuff happen, but I feel like we got to do better. We got to have better people in charge to make this stuff happen. But yeah, I'm going to stop now because this is actually the longest review I've had to do for this podcast in a long time. And I could say more, but I don't want to ramble any more than I have. But I thank you for sticking around so long. And if you have any thoughts and opinions about Jurassic World Rebirth, let me know in the comment section below, or hit me up on Twitter where I'm at Hypersonic55 or at FilmFocus55, or check us out on Instagram where it's FilmFocus or at Hypersonic55. I welcome all of your thoughts, opinions, and feedback. And yeah, just be sure to check out the podcast where podcasts can be found on all sorts of places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And yeah, I guess that's about it. The next review for the podcast will probably be Superman, in case anything shows up between now and then, which it probably won't, but it better be good. But yeah, that's me done for now. Thank you for listening as always, and until the next time, this is the Hypersonic 55 signing out. Peace.